Arriving home to his new mansion far earlier than expected, the millionaire was met with a sight that nearly made him collapse. The heavy, solid oak door glided open, silent on its state-of-the-art German hinges. Roberto, his custom-tailored Italian suit still immaculate after 12 hours of grueling real estate negotiations, took a single step into the grand foyer and stopped cold. His right hand, gripping a leather briefcase heavy with million-dollar contracts, went slack. The briefcase dropped, striking the polished marble of the foyer with a sharp thud, yet he didn't so much as blink. His entire body went rigid. A jolt shot down his spine, and the air seemed to vanish from his lungs. This wasn't an intruder, nor was it the blare of a security alarm. It was something far more terrifying and miraculous. It was the sound of laughter, a clear, pure, and infectious peal of joy echoing off the high walls of the living room. It was a sound Roberto hadn't heard in over 18 months. The sound of his son, Lucas. With his heart hammering against his ribs, Roberto moved forward slowly, almost fearful that the click of his designer shoes might shatter the spell. He peered around the archway leading into the main salon, where golden afternoon light poured in through the vast armored windows. The sight that met his eyes nearly buckled his knees. There, in the middle of the Persian rug, a collector's piece worth more than a sports car, was Elena, the new housekeeper. She wasn't scrubbing floors or dusting the bronze statues. She was lying on her back, her crisp blue uniform still on, along with a pair of absurdly bright yellow rubber gloves. And held aloft in her arms that were somehow both strong and delicate, was Lucas. His son, the child doctors had diagnosed as emotionally withdrawn since his mother's death, was flying. Elena gently soared him through the air, making airplane noises, as the little boy shrieked with laughter, his eyes bright and utterly alive, his chubby little hands reaching playfully for her nose. "Vroom, here comes Captain Lucas's airplane," Elena said in a gentle voice, seemingly oblivious to the fact she was in a stranger's mansion, playing with the air to an untold fortune while on the clock. Roberto pressed a hand to his chest. The image seared itself into his memory, the sunlight catching in Elena's brown hair, the stark contrast of the yellow rubber gloves cradling his son's small frame with such tenderness, and the look of pure adoration on the little boy's face. For a single, breathless moment, time stood still. The chronic ache Roberto had carried since his wife's accident seemed to lift. Lucas wasn't broken. His son was there, alive, laughing, connecting with someone. But then reality, as cold and unyielding as the deals he brokered, crashed back in as Elena, mid-tickle, happened to turn her head and saw the dark silhouette of her employer in the archway. Her smile evaporated. With a swift yet gentle movement, she protectively lowered Lucas to the carpet, then scrambled to her feet, smoothing her uniform with trembling hands. A flicker of fear crossed her dark eyes. She knew the household rules were strict. Service staff were not to interact with young Master Lucas beyond what was absolutely necessary. "Sir, Mr. Roberto," she stammered, her gaze dropping to his expensive shoes. "I'm so sorry. I had just finished the windows and..." He was crying in his crib, and I just didn't want to disturb anyone. But Roberto couldn't speak. His throat had seized up. He wanted to tell her not to apologize, that he would pay her 3 times her salary just to hear his son laugh like that again. But years of upholding an iron facade had left him paralyzed. Lucas, realizing their game was over, glanced from his father to Elena, then reached his small arms toward her with a soft whimper of protest. That single gesture, that simple preference for the housekeeper over his own father, was a dagger that pierced both Roberto's pride and his heart. Subscribe now to discover how this moment of innocence would unleash the fury of an ambitious woman and place little Lucas's life in peril. The decision Roberto was about to make would forever alter the fate of this mansion. He took a deep breath, reclaiming his formidable composure. He took one step into the room, his shadow falling across the carpet, symbolically separating the woman from the child. "How long has this been going on, Elena?" he asked, his voice low and unreadable. Elena clasped her gloved hands against her apron. "Only a few minutes, sir, I swear. I was just returning to the kitchen. Please, I need this job." Roberto looked at his son, who was now somber, the light in his eyes slowly fading before the adult tension. Then his gaze fell upon Elena. He saw something in her that was absent in the women of his social circle, and in the members of the country club, and certainly not in Sophia, his fiancée. He saw humanity. "I wasn't asking about your job," Roberto said, his tone softening imperceptibly. "I asked how long you've been able to make my son laugh like that, because I have spent a year trying, and I have failed every single day." The confession hung in the mansion's conditioned air, heavy and painful. Roberto loosened the knot of his silk tie, suddenly feeling drained. The house, a 5,000 square meter modern structure designed by the city's most sought-after architect, had always felt more like a mausoleum since Isabel's death. It had travertine marble, works of art insured for millions of dollars, and smart home systems that controlled even the water temperature. But there was no home. Only silence. An expensive, suffocating silence broken only by calls from his lawyers or the sound of Lucas crying alone in the night. Elena looked up, startled by the vulnerability in her employer's voice. She knew the rumors. Everyone at the domestic staffing agency talked about Roberto, the real estate king, the man who bought entire buildings without batting an eye, but who couldn't bring himself to look at his own son because he was too painful a reminder of his late wife. They had warned her to be invisible, efficient, and quick. Clean, get paid, and leave, her supervisor had told her. Don't get attached to the boy. That house is an ice palace. But Elena couldn't be a machine. She was 25 years old, burdened by massive hospital debt from her mother's heart surgery, and filled with a maternal instinct that overflowed within her. He's not difficult, sir," Elena murmured, nervously pulling off one of her gloves, revealing a hand red and raw from the cleaning chemicals. "He is just lonely. Children don't understand luxury or schedules or why their mother is gone. They only understand presence. Sometimes when I clean the playroom, he just follows me with his eyes. Today, I just couldn't stand to watch him cry while looking out the window." Roberto watched the child. Lucas had crawled over to Elena's leg and was clinging to the fabric of her uniform as if it were a life raft in the middle of the ocean. The businessman felt a pang of jealousy, but also one of profound shame. He had bought Lucas the finest educational toys. He had hired the most certified nannies in Europe, child development specialists with doctorates. All of them had either resigned or been dismissed for their failure to connect. And then there was Elena, a woman who probably earned in a month what he spent on a single business dinner, making the impossible happen with nothing more than a simple airplane game. "My fiancée, Sophia." Roberto began to speak, but caught himself. Bringing up Sophia right now felt wrong. She was always complaining about the noise, about how the boy needed discipline, rigid schedules to ensure nothing would compromise his future as a leader. Sophia would never get down on the floor. She'd ruin her Chanel dress. "Miss Sophia says I'm not supposed to hold him," Elena said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if the very walls had ears. "She says it spoils him, being held, that it makes him weak. But with all due respect, Mr. Roberto, a baby isn't spoiled by love. He starves without it." Her words struck Roberto with the force of a final verdict. He starves without it. He walked to the crystal minibar and poured a glass of water, turning his back to her to conceal his expression. His mind, always the businessman, was already calculating risks and returns, processing the situation at lightning speed. He had a crucial dinner that evening. Japanese investors, traditional men who valued family above all else. The house needed to feel like a home, warm and inviting. He needed Lucas to be settled. The previous nannies had either given up on the boy or hidden him away in the West Wing so he wouldn't be a nuisance. Roberto turned, glass in hand. "Elena, what time does your shift end?" "At 5, sir." "In 10 minutes. I have to catch the 5:15 bus to get my mother her medicine on time." "Not anymore," Roberto said, retrieving a crocodile leather wallet from his inner jacket pocket. He didn't pull out any cash. Instead, he produced a black credit card. "You're going to miss that bus." A flash of panic widened Elena's eyes. "Sir, please, I can't work late today. My mother is all alone and—" "You misunderstand me," Roberto cut in, closing the distance between them. He crouched down, bringing himself level with her eyes and with his son's. Lucas, seeing his father so near and so calm, reached out a curious little hand and touched the graying stubble on Roberto's jaw. The millionaire flinched at the unexpected contact. "I don't want you to do any more cleaning today. I want you to stay with Lucas through dinner this evening. I want you to do precisely what you were doing when I walked in. Play with him, laugh with him, hold him." "As his nanny?" she asked, confused. "But I'm part of the cleaning staff. The agency doesn't allow—" "I own this house, and I own that contract," Roberto stated, his voice laced with the authority that made his competitors tremble. "For this one evening, I will pay you 3 times your monthly salary, and I will send a private car to collect your mother and bring her here. Or, if she prefers to stay home, the driver will deliver her medicine along with a private nurse. Whatever you decide, but I need to hear Lucas laugh again." Elena considered the offer. It was enough to cover 2 months of her mother's medical treatments, all for a single night's work. But it wasn't the money that swayed her. It was Lucas. The little boy had rested his head against her knee, calm and secure. "I accept, sir, but on one condition," she said, lifting her chin with a dignity that took Roberto by surprise. "Are you negotiating with me?" An intrigued eyebrow arched on Roberto's forehead. "Yes. The condition is that you have to try too. Lucas doesn't need an employee to make him laugh. He needs his father. I can watch over him tonight, but you must promise me you'll try to get down on the floor with us. Even for just 5 minutes." Roberto was silent. No one, absolutely no one, dared to speak to him that way. Not his board members, not his partners. Only Isabel ever had. A sad, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Deal," Roberto said. Just then, the sharp click of high heels on marble echoed from the grand foyer. The cadence was fast, aggressive, domineering. Instantly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to plummet by 10 degrees Celsius. Lucas tensed, hiding behind Elena. "Roberto!" Sophia's shrill, demanding voice echoed through the hall moments before she swept into view. "You will not believe what that incompetent decorator of yours has done to me, and I trust that maid is gone. My guests are arriving in 2 hours, and this entire house reeks of cheap cleaning supplies." Sophia stormed into the living room like a hurricane, draped in faux fur and laden with designer shopping bags. She stopped dead, taking in the scene. Her millionaire fiancé was crouched on the floor, far too close to the cleaning woman and her brat. Her perfectly lined eyes narrowed with a mixture of suspicion and contempt. "What precisely is going on here?" Sophia demanded, folding her arms across her surgically enhanced chest. "Roberto, get up. You're going to wrinkle your $3,000 suit." "And you," she said, aiming a finger tipped with a razor-sharp acrylic nail at Elena. "Why are you still here? Don't you have some slum to go back to?" Elena lowered her eyes, intimidated by the sheer presence of the woman who would soon be mistress of the house. But Roberto rose slowly, drawing himself up to his full, imposing height. He smoothed the fabric of his suit but did not step away from Elena or Lucas. He looked at his fiancée, truly looked at her, and for the first time noticed something he had always ignored, the absolute absence of warmth in her eyes. "Elena is staying for dinner," Roberto said calmly. "What?" Sophia let out a short, nervous laugh. "What on earth are you talking about? To serve? We have a catering staff for that." "Not to serve," Roberto clarified. "To look after Lucas, and to join us." It wasn't a request. Sophia felt an invisible line being drawn. Her eyes darted from the maid in her simple uniform and makeup-free face, then back to Roberto. Her survival instinct kicked in. This woman, this nobody, had managed to capture more of Roberto's attention in 5 minutes than Sophia had all week with her plunging necklines. That was dangerous. Extremely dangerous. "As you wish, darling," Sophia cooed, her tone shifting to one of cloying sweetness, though her eyes threw daggers at Elena. "But do make sure she washes her hands properly. We wouldn't want her spreading germs to our guests, or to the jewelry I'll be leaving on my vanity." It was a warning, a thinly veiled threat. As Sophia ascended the staircase to the master suite, her mind was already spinning, hatching a plan. If the cleaning woman wanted to play the doting mother, Sophia would see to it that she ended the night not with a generous tip, but in the back of a squad car. No one touched what was hers. Not her money, not her man, and certainly not her future mansion. The mansion's master suite was off limits to the staff, a 70-square-meter shrine to Sophia's own ego. Standing before a full-length, gilt-framed mirror, Sophia finished fastening an emerald necklace, an engagement gift from Roberto. The cold stones against her skin reminded her why she endured the whimpering child and the loneliness of this immense house. It was for the power. Sophia did not love Roberto, at least not in the way people love in fairy tales. She loved the security he represented, the status that came with being the wife of the country's most prominent real estate magnate. She gave herself one last look, adjusting the neckline of her blood-red dress, a gown designed to capture every eye in the room. "Perfect," she whispered. But her perfect moment was shattered by a muffled giggle from the adjoining room, Lucas's room. The sound twisted her lips into a sneer. She hated noise. To Sophia, children were meant to be seen and not heard, like expensive furniture brought out only for Christmas photos. She stalked to the connecting door, flinging it open without a knock. The scene that greeted her made her grit her teeth. Elena was on the floor, sitting on the plush carpet as she finished buttoning the child's small white shirt. Lucas, who was always so tense and fearful around Sophia, was now completely relaxed, babbling happily as his fingers played with a loose button on the maid's uniform. "They're still not ready," Sophia's voice sliced through the air. Elena flinched and rose instantly, pulling Lucas up with her. The little boy, upon seeing Sophia, immediately hid behind the young woman's legs. That instinctive act of rejection ignited a flash of fury in the fiancé's eyes. "Just a moment more, Miss Sophia," Elena answered, her head bowed, carefully avoiding the dazzling emerald necklace that shimmered in the light. "The boy's tie seems a bit tight. It's bothering him." Sophia strode across the room with long, purposeful steps. She grabbed Lucas by the arm and yanked him harshly toward her, tearing him from the maid's protective presence. Lucas let out a small whimper, but he did not cry. He had learned that crying in front of Sophia only made things worse. "The tie stays," Sophia declared, tightening the knot with unnecessary force. "The Japanese investors from the Tanakaka group are arriving tonight." Image is everything. If Roberto's son appears like a poorly dressed vagrant, they will assume his father has no control over his own affairs. And if he has no control, there is no money. Do you understand that? Or is it too complex for your servant's brain to process? Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides, humiliation burning her cheeks like a fever. She wanted to scream that Sophia was hurting the child, that a 2-year-old boy couldn't possibly understand investors or appearances. but she knew that a single misstep would leave her on the street, and she needed the money for her mother. She swallowed her pride, a bitter metallic taste in her mouth. "I understand, miss." Sophia shoved the child away, and he scrambled back into Elena's arms. The blonde woman moved in, dangerously close to the maid, invading her personal space. She smelled of expensive French perfume and pure cruelty. "Listen to me very carefully, you sly little thing," Sophia hissed, a smile on her lips that never reached her cold eyes. "Roberto may be going through some crisis of a guilty father, and he might find your perfect nanny act utterly charming. But I see you for what you truly are. You are a cheap gold digger. Do you think that by winning over the son, you can win the father?" Elena looked up, stunned by the accusation. "Ma'am, I am only doing my job. The boy needs affection." "The boy needs discipline," Sophia cut in sharply. "And you need to remember your place. You are here today on Roberto's whim. But tomorrow you'll be back to scrubbing toilets, which is all you're good for. And be careful." Sophia touched her own emerald necklace with a theatrical gesture. "There are many valuable things in this house. If anything were to disappear, no matter how small, I won't simply fire you. I will make certain you end up in a prison cell for so long that you forget what the sun looks like." A chill ran down Elena's spine. It was not an idle warning. It was a direct threat. "I am not a thief, miss. That's what they all say." Sophia spun on her heel, her dress fanning out around her. "Keep the child quiet. If he cries during the dinner and ruins this deal, I swear you will wish you had never been born." Sophia swept from the room, leaving a suffocating tension in her wake. Elena knelt and hugged Lucas, who was trembling faintly. "Don't you worry, my love," she whispered into his ear, kissing his forehead. "I am here. No one will hurt you as long as I am here. We'll play a game of silent statues." "Yes, like ninjas." But as she comforted the boy, Elena's own heart was pounding. She had seen the look in Sophia's eyes. It was more than just disdain. It was fear. Sophia was terrified of losing her place, and a frightened woman with power and money is the most dangerous enemy there is. Elena had no idea that at that very instant, as Sophia descended the staircase, she was already formulating a plan to get her out of the way for good. Firing her wouldn't suffice. She had to be destroyed in Roberto's eyes. The mansion's main dining hall was a spectacle of pure opulence. A mahogany table set for 12 people was arranged with gleaming silver cutlery. Bohemian crystal goblets gleamed beside exotic floral arrangements, each a small fortune in itself. At the head of the table, Roberto presided over the evening, with Sophia positioned at his right and Mr. Tanaka, the chief investor, seated to his left. 3 other executives filled the remaining seats. The air was taut, thick with a stifling formality and the unspoken pressure of multi-million-dollar figures. Roberto felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The agreement with the Tanaka Group represented far more than just a massive infusion of capital for his new apartment tower. It was the gateway to his company's international expansion. For 2 hours, their discussion had been a dry litany of interest rates, zoning regulations, and market forecasts. Everything was unfolding precisely to plan, right up until the moment the main course was served. "The architecture of the northern sector is quite remarkable," Mr. Tanaka observed, his Spanish measured and impeccable. "But we are concerned with the domestic stability of our associates. In our culture, a man who is unable to preserve harmony in his own household is unlikely to maintain equilibrium within a multinational enterprise." Roberto nodded, dabbing a single drop of cold sweat from his temple. "Absolutely, Mr. Tanaka. My family is my highest priority. Indeed, my fiancée Sophia has been a cornerstone of support." His words were cut short as a shrill cry fractured the dining room's composed quiet. It emanated from the small adjoining lounge where Elena was attempting to keep Lucas occupied. A tomb-like silence descended upon the table. Sophia's eyes snapped shut, her fingers clenching the linen napkin so tightly that her knuckles shone white. Mr. Tanaka halted his wine glass mid-air, a curious eyebrow arching on his forehead. "Is that your son, Roberto?" he asked. "Yes, if you'll pardon me for a moment." Roberto made a move to stand, but Sophia's hand fell upon his arm, halting his movement. Her smile was a taut, almost pained expression. "Don't trouble yourself, darling. I will see to it," Sophia said with a cloying sweetness. "I'm sure the new girl simply doesn't know how to soothe him. You know how it is with hired help these days, so inept. Please, carry on with your business." Sophia then stood and glided toward the adjacent lounge. The instant she passed through the arch, the smile evaporated. She found Elena gently rocking Lucas, whose face was red as he cried, rubbing furiously at his eyes. The child was exhausted and overwhelmed by the break in his routine. "Silence him!" Sophia hissed, surreptitiously pinching the child's arm, a cruel bid for obedience. Lucas, startled by the pain and hostility, cried out even louder. "He's sleepy, ma'am. He's just exhausted. He needs to be in his crib." "But you insisted he remain downstairs until the guests had gone," Elena explained, attempting to shield the child from Sophia's reach. "I couldn't care less what he needs." Sophia grabbed a hard plastic toy and shoved it harshly toward the boy. "Just give him the wretched toy and make him quiet. They can hear you." Lucas's whimpers turned into shrieks of pure panic. In the dining room, the conversation had died completely. Roberto, no longer able to ignore his son's distress, offered his apologies and stood, followed by the curious gaze of Mr. Tanaka. As Roberto reached the lounge, he found Sophia gripping the child by the shoulders and shaking him, her face contorted with unchecked rage, all while Elena, tears welling in her eyes, tried to intervene. "Sophia!" Roberto's voice was a clap of thunder. Sophia dropped her hands from the child and whirled around, her features instantly rearranging into a mask of concern. "Roberto, thank goodness! I was just telling this girl she can't pinch him." Look at the poor thing cry. But before Roberto had a moment to absorb the deception, Elena did something no servant would have dared. Ignoring the adults, ignoring the danger, she lowered herself to the floor, crossed her legs, and began to hum. It was a low, deep, rhythmic tune, an ancient lullaby her grandmother's to sing. Lucas, who was hyperventilating, recognized the familiar sound. Elena didn't touch him. She simply offered her open hands, palms facing up. "Come, little bird, come to the nest," she sang softly. The child, mesmerized by the calm that radiated from her in the middle of the storm, stopped screaming. He sobbed a few times, glancing at his father, then at the woman in red, before launching himself into Elena's arms, burying his face in her chest. Within 10 seconds, the crying had ceased. All that remained was the sound of the boy's agitated breathing as it settled, and Elena's gentle melody. Roberto was stunned into silence, but he was not alone. Behind him, Mr. Tanaka and the other investors had quietly entered to witness the scene. The Japanese investor watched Elena, who cradled the child with absolute devotion, oblivious to the fact that she was being observed by men deciding the fate of millions of dollars. Then his gaze shifted to Sophia, who stood rigid, her brow furrowed and hands clenched, a portrait of cold frustration. "Impressive," Mr. Tanaka said softly. He approached Elena and bowed slightly. "A child recognizes a true heart. One cannot deceive the innocent." A surge of pride for his son, mixed with a strange warmth, washed over Roberto as he looked at Elena. "This is Elena," Roberto said, not bothering to clarify her role. He didn't say the help, he used her name. "You have a great asset in your home, Roberto," Tanaka said, casting a meaningful glance toward Sophia before his eyes returned to the tender scene on the floor. "Patience is a virtue we value greatly. I can see your son is in good hands. That gives me confidence in your judgment when choosing the people you surround yourself with, at least some of them." The comment was subtle, but its effect was devastating. Sophia felt the remark like a physical slap. The investors were not looking at her with admiration. They were watching the maid in her cheap uniform. Elena, without a trace of makeup or a single piece of jewelry, had earned in a single minute the respect that Sophia had spent months trying to purchase. Roberto nodded, understanding the message perfectly. "Elena, please, take Lucas to bed. I believe he's had enough for one day." "Thank you." Elena rose with the boy, who was already half asleep in her arms. She passed Sophia without a glance, but Sophia's eyes never left her. In that moment, watching Roberto's gaze follow the maid's back with an expression of gratitude and something far more profound, something Sophia had never received from him, her decision was forged. This was no longer about simply firing her. Sophia's eyes fell to her own engagement ring, a solitary 5-carat diamond. Then she looked at the worn cloth bag where Elena kept her personal things, left carelessly on a chair in the corner of the room. A malicious, almost imperceptible smile curled the edges of Sophia's lips. Mr. Tanaka wanted to judge the character of people. Very well. Sophia would give him a display of character he would never forget. If Elena wanted to be the protagonist, then Sophia would write her a tragic ending this very night. "Shall we finish our dessert, gentlemen?" Sophia asked, slipping back into her role as the perfect hostess, though a fire of pure rage burned within her. "I am certain we have much to celebrate before the night ends with a few surprises." No one detected the double meaning in her words. Roberto returned to the table feeling lighter, believing the crisis had been averted. He had no idea that the true crisis, the one that would shatter his trust and break his heart, was about to begin with a simple sleight of hand and a hidden jewel. Dinner had concluded, and cigars were being lit on the terrace. The atmosphere, while relaxed by the fine spirits and the successful negotiation, still held that static charge that only immense sums of money can generate. Roberto was leading Mr. Tanaka to the cedar humidor, explaining the provenance of the tobaccos, feeling as if he had finally, truly, regained control of the night. Inside the house, however, a far more precise and sinister operation was already in motion. Sophia excused herself with a rehearsed smile, claiming she needed to touch up her makeup. The sound of her steps echoed down the empty hall, but her destination wasn't the guest bathroom. She moved with the stealth of a predator toward the small utility closet by the kitchen, where the staff kept their belongings. She knew Elena was upstairs, putting Lucas to bed. She had a 3-minute window of opportunity, perhaps 4 at most. As she stepped into the closet, Sophia's nose wrinkled in disgust. It reeked of bleach and hard work, scents she despised. On a cheap wooden chair, she saw her target, Elena's handbag. It was a worn fabric backpack with a zipper that likely snagged, an object that screamed poverty and desperation. Sophia glanced down at her own left hand. The engagement ring, a princess-cut solitaire diamond haloed by smaller brilliance, glittered under the room's fluorescent light. It was worth more than the maid's entire house, worth more than the woman's life. With a swift movement and not a hint of remorse, Sophia slipped the ring off. Her finger felt bare, light, but her heart hammered with the weight of adrenaline. She opened Elena's backpack. Inside were the bare essentials, a change of clothes and a creased photograph of an elderly woman in a hospital bed. Her mother, Sophia presumed with cold detachment, and a cheap coin purse. But Sophia needed the discovery to be humiliating, symbolic. She checked a side pocket and found the yellow rubber gloves Elena used to clean the bathrooms. "Perfect," she whispered. She slid the $50,000 ring deep into one of the fingers of the filthy rubber glove. The irony was exquisite. The crown jewel hidden inside the tool of a servant. She zipped the backpack shut, smoothed the fabric so it wouldn't look disturbed, and slipped out of the room. She checked her reflection in a hallway mirror, mussed her hair slightly, and practiced her look of distress. She took 3 deep breaths, forcing tears to well in her eyes. "Roberto!" The scream tore through the mansion's tranquility. It wasn't a cry of pain, but of pure, hysterical panic. On the terrace, Roberto dropped his cigar cutter. Mr. Tanaka spun around. "What is wrong?" the investor asked. "Roberto, please come quickly!" Sophia's voice was coming from the main living room. Roberto bolted inside, the investors close behind him. He found Sophia standing in the middle of the room, pale, clutching her left hand with her right, trembling visibly. "What is it, Sophia? Are you hurt?" Roberto grabbed her by the shoulders, searching for any sign of blood or injury. "My ring," she sobbed, hyperventilating. "My engagement ring, Roberto, it's gone." "What do you mean, it's gone? You were wearing it 10 minutes ago at dinner. Did it fall off in the bathroom?" "No." Sophia pulled away from him, her indignation perfectly staged. "I took it off for just a second in the guest washroom to wash my hands because they felt greasy from the lamb. I left it on the marble counter. I stepped out to find a towel, and when I came back, it was gone." A silence fell over the group. Mr. Tanaka's brow furrowed. "Was anyone else in that area of the house?" the Japanese man asked with the cold logic of a businessman. Sophia's gaze drifted toward the staircase. Just as Elena was coming down, her eyes tired but calm, completely unaware of the storm about to break over her, the maid was holding the baby monitor. "Only her," Sophia said, pointing an accusing finger that trembled with feigned rage. "Only she came downstairs a moment ago for some water. I saw her walk past the bathroom." Elena stopped on the bottom step, bewildered. She saw everyone's faces, Sophia's fury, the investor's suspicion, and Roberto's bewilderment. "I'm sorry," she asked, her voice small. "Is something wrong with the baby?" "Don't play dumb," Sophia snarled, advancing on her like a lioness. "Where is my ring? Give it back to me this instant, and I might not involve the police." Color drained from Elena's face as she hurried down the stairs. "Ma'am, I haven't seen any ring." "I've been with Lucas the entire time. I only came down to the kitchen for some warm water for his bottle. I didn't even go into the guest bathroom." "Liar!" Sophia shrieked. "You're the only outsider in this house. My guests are all millionaires. They have no reason to steal. You're the one who's desperate for money. I overheard you on the phone talking about your mother's debts. You're a desperate little thief." Roberto raised a hand, calling for quiet. His rational mind warred with the circumstantial evidence. Just moments ago, he had watched Elena care for his son with an affection that seemed so genuine. He couldn't fathom how that same woman could be capable of theft just minutes later. "Sophia, calm down," Roberto said, his voice firm. "Elena, look at me. Did you take the ring?" Elena met Roberto's gaze, her dark eyes welling up with tears, but they were tears of fear, not of guilt. "Senor Roberto, I swear on my mother's life and on the health of your son. I touched nothing. I would never do such a thing. You saw how I cared for Lucas." "That's just an act," Sophia cut in, seizing on his hesitation. "She gets close to the child to gain our trust, then she ransacks the house. Roberto, if you don't believe me, search her belongings. Her bag is in the utility room. If she has nothing to hide, she won't mind if we take a look." Elena nodded emphatically, though her hands trembled. "Please, search everything. I have nothing." A bitter taste filled Roberto's mouth. To search an employee's personal things in front of his international partners was utterly humiliating. It was an admission of failure, a breach in the security of his own home. But his fiancée's honor and the pressure of the moment left him no choice. "Let's go," Roberto said curtly. The group moved towards the utility room. The air grew thick, suffocating. Trailing behind them, Elena prayed silently. She knew she was innocent. She had to believe the truth would prevail. She had no way of knowing that the truth had already been twisted. The utility room was small, made claustrophobic by the presence of 5 men in expensive suits and 2 women. Roberto gestured toward the worn backpack slung over a chair. "Is this it?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Elena replied, her voice cracking. Roberto took the bag. He could feel Mr. Tanaka's stare burning into the back of his neck. A man who cannot control his own household. The investor's words echoed in his mind. Roberto unzipped the bag and emptied its contents onto the ironing board. A few old clothes, a plastic coin purse, a comb, and a photograph of Elena's mother spilled out. Nothing of value. An immense wave of relief washed over Roberto. He finally let out the breath he had been holding. "There's nothing here, Sophia," Roberto said, turning to her, his expression a mixture of reproach for her and apology for Elena. "I told you this was a mistake. The ring probably fell down the drain." Elena let out a sob of relief, covering her mouth with her hands. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." But Sophia was not about to be defeated. Her performance was reaching its climax. She approached the table, her eyes scanning the scattered items with surgical precision. "And what's that?" She pointed to the yellow bulge of a pair of rubber gloves, still tucked inside the bag's side pocket, which Roberto hadn't fully emptied. "Those are just my work gloves," Elena said. "Take everything out," Sophia demanded. "Thieves can be very creative." Roberto, now impatient and desperate to end this farce so he could apologize to both Elena and his investors, reached into the side pocket and pulled out the gloves. As he did, he felt an unfamiliar weight inside one of the rubber fingers. He shook it out over the table. The sound was unmistakable. Clink. The diamond ring tumbled onto the ironing board, glittering with a cold malice under the artificial light. It spun twice before coming to a stop, directly in front of the photograph of Elena's mother. Time itself seemed to stop. Elena held her breath, her eyes flying wide in disbelief. She stared at the jewel as if it were a venomous creature that had just materialized from thin air. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible. Not me. Someone planted it. Mr. Roberto, I swear to you, it wasn't me." Roberto's gaze shifted from the ring to Elena, and the change in his expression was terrifying. The warmth, the doubt, the very hope he had allowed himself to feel for her just an hour before, it all evaporated in an instant. In its place was the iron mask of a betrayed tycoon. He knew the world, he knew that people were liars, and he knew that the desperation for money drove them to madness. But the theft of the ring wasn't what cut him so deeply. It was the betrayal of his son. He was convinced she had used Lucas, manipulating the emotions of a motherless child only to lower the father's defenses and steal from him. The thought turned his blood to ice. "Someone planted it," Roberto repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Who, Elena? My Japanese investors? Or are you suggesting my fiancée hid her own ring inside your filthy gloves?" "I don't know, but it wasn't me." Elena took a frantic step toward him, reaching out to touch his arm, to make him believe her. "Don't touch me!" Roberto roared, recoiling as if she were carrying some vile disease. His shout sent Elena shrinking back against the wall. Mr. Tanaka observed the scene with clear disappointment, offering a slight shake of his head. The portrait of the perfect family had just been torn to shreds. All trust was broken. "Roberto, call the police," Sophia said, snatching her ring and sliding it onto her finger with victorious satisfaction. "Let them take her. She's a criminal." Elena finally broke, a heart-wrenching sob of pure helplessness escaping her. "No, please, not the police. If they take me, my mother will be left all alone. She needs me." "Sir, please, think about Lucas. Lucas knows that I'm good." Mentioning Lucas was her final, fatal error. Roberto shut his eyes for a brief moment. The memory of his son laughing with this woman now felt like a grotesque mockery. "Don't you ever speak my son's name again," Roberto said, his voice a blade that sliced through the air. "You should consider yourself lucky. I don't want a police scandal in my house with guests present." Roberto pulled out his wallet, not for money, but for a business card belonging to the building's security firm. "You are going to leave this house right now. You will walk out that door and you will never return. You are fired, and I will be certain to call your agency first thing in the morning to inform them of the theft. You will never again work in a decent home in this city." "Sir!" Elena begged. "Get out!" Roberto screamed, pointing a finger at the service door, "before I reconsider and have you thrown in a cell." "Leave!" Elena looked at the men, impassive walls of stone. She glanced at Sophia, who was smirking with pure cruelty from behind Roberto's shoulder. In that instant, she knew she had lost. She grabbed her backpack with trembling hands. She hastily threw her things inside, leaving the yellow gloves on the table. A pair of silent witnesses to the injustice. She fled through the back door and into the cold night, weeping uncontrollably. Inside the house, silence fell once more. Roberto ran a hand through his hair, his face a mask of shame and fury. "Gentlemen, I must offer my sincerest apologies for this deplorable spectacle," he said, turning to Tanaka. "It is so difficult to find trustworthy staff these days." "A true pity," Tanaka said, his eyes fixed on the door through which the girl had vanished. "She seemed to possess a special gift, but appearances can be deceiving, can't they, Roberto?" "Yes," Roberto answered, his gaze falling upon Sophia, who was stroking his arm with a counterfeit sweetness. "Appearances can be deceiving." Sophia pressed a kiss to Roberto's cheek. "You handled that perfectly, darling. You protected our home. Now everything can finally get back to normal. Lucas would be better off without that corrupting presence." Roberto nodded, but as he gazed at the closed door, a strange hollowness formed in the pit of his stomach. He had reclaimed the ring. He had served justice, yet he felt as if he had just lost something far more precious, something Mr. Tanaka's money could never replace. Upstairs in his crib, Lucas awoke and began to weep, calling out for someone who was no longer there. But this time, no one came to comfort him. The music in the house had fallen silent. The mansion had returned to its flawless order. There were no toys strewn across the living room, no tiny shoe prints on the Persian rugs, and above all, there was no laughter. The silence that reigned over the property was absolute, as heavy and dense as fog. 48 hours had passed since Elena was cast out into the cold night, accused of a crime she did not commit, and the house seemed to have entered a state of stark mourning. Roberto sat in his study, trying to review the final contracts for the merger with the Japanese group. The figures danced before his eyes, zeros upon zeros that represented power, but his mind was on the floor above. The baby monitor on his mahogany desk was on, but it broadcast no sound. No cries, no babbling, no restless breathing, only dead, white static. That silence terrified him more than any scream. Unable to concentrate, he rose and took the stairs 2 at a time. In the hallway, he encountered Mrs. Gertrudis, the new nanny the agency had sent as an emergency placement. She was an older woman in a starched uniform, with a severe face and impeccable references from European royalty. Efficient, sterile, and utterly devoid of warmth. "How is he?" Roberto asked, loosening his tie. Mrs. Gertrudis shook her head with an expression of clinical disapproval. "The child is being obstinate, Mr. Roberto. He refuses to consume solid foods. He has rejected the organic vegetable puree and has barely taken 2 ounces of milk all day. I have attempted to implement the controlled crying method, leaving him in the crib so he understands that tantrums are ineffective." "But tantrums," Roberto interrupted, feeling a sharp pang of irritation. "My son is not throwing a tantrum. My son is barely moving." He strode into Lucas's room. The curtains were drawn on the new nanny's orders to facilitate rest, casting the room in a sorrowful gloom. Lucas was sitting in the center of his Italian designer crib. He was not playing. His favorite teddy bear lay beside him, completely ignored. He was staring at the door, his eyes swollen and red, but they were dry. He had no tears left. His gaze was distant, empty, like that of an old man who has seen too much war, not that of a 2-year-old child. "Hello, champ," Roberto whispered, approaching with a forced smile. Lucas turned his head slowly. He showed no reaction at the sight of his father. No outstretched arms, no smile. Just a look of infinite disappointment. He was waiting for someone else, someone in a blue uniform and yellow gloves. Realizing it was only his father, the man who had sent that person away, Lucas turned back to the wall, letting out a deep sigh. The rejection was a physical blow. Roberto felt as if he had been punched in the gut. "I brought something for you," Roberto said, pulling an enormous, brightly wrapped box from behind his back. It was the latest interactive robot model, a technological marvel that cost more than any of his employees' annual salary. "Look, Lucas, it talks, it moves, it has lights." He switched the robot on. The toy began to flash with strobing lights and emit cheerful electronic sounds. "Hello, my friend. Let's go play." Lucas covered his ears with his small hands and curled into a ball in the corner of the crib, shuddering. The noise was hurting him. The light was jarring. "Turn that off, please," a voice commanded from the doorway. Roberto spun around. Sophia stood there, dressed for a charity gala, looking both impeccable and irritated. "That noise is hellish, Roberto, and the child needs discipline." "Not toys. If he refuses to eat, it's because he isn't hungry. He'll eat when he's ready. Children are manipulative by nature." "I read it in an article. He's trying to punish you." Roberto switched the robot off with a sharp flick, a sudden rage flaring up inside him, at the toy, at his fiancée's chilling detachment. "He's not manipulating anyone, Sophia. He's in pain. He's lost weight in just 2 days. You can see his ribs." "You're overreacting." Sophia swept into the room, glancing at her diamond watch. "It's just a phase. He probably misses that thief because she plied him with sweets and let him do whatever he pleased. It's withdrawal from being spoiled. He'll get over it." "Speaking of which, are you ready? The foundation event starts in 40 minutes, and the driver is waiting." "We can't be late. The press will be there." Roberto's gaze shifted from his small, pale son in the crib to Sophia, whose only concern was the cameras. "I'm not going," Roberto stated. Sophia froze, turning toward him as slowly and menacingly as a snake. "I beg your pardon. This is the most important gala of the year. I'm chairing the committee. You are expected to be by my side. What will people say if I arrive alone?" "Tell them my son is ill. Tell them I'm a father. Not just a walking wallet. I don't care what they say. I'm staying with Lucas." Sophia's eyes flashed with a barely suppressed fury. She moved closer, lowering her voice so the nanny waiting in the hall couldn't overhear. "You're making a fool of yourself. Roberto, you're letting an infant dictate your schedule, your entire life. This whole sickness is an act, but do as you please. Stay here and wallow in the stench of vomit and misery. I'll go and represent this family, since you clearly lack the fortitude." Sophia stormed from the room, slamming the door so hard the window panes rattled. Lucas flinched, startled by the sound, but made no noise. Roberto moved back to the crib and gathered his son into his arms. The boy felt weightless, far too light, and his skin was hot to the touch. "You're burning up," Roberto murmured, pressing a hand to the boy's forehead. This wasn't a normal warmth. Lucas's skin was dry and feverish. He bellowed for Mrs. Gertrudis. "Bring me the thermometer, now!" The nanny entered at a measured pace, which only fueled Roberto's desperation. She placed the digital thermometer in the child's ear. A few seconds later, it beeped. 39.5, sir. It's a high fever. Call the pediatrician, Dr. Valenzuela. Tell him to come at once." "Dr. Valenzuela doesn't make house calls this late, sir. We'll have to schedule an appointment for tomorrow or take him to the emergency room." "I'll pay him $10,000 if he's here in 20 minutes, Roberto roared, his polished, professional demeanor completely shattering. "Call him, And you tell him that if he isn't here, I will buy the clinic he works for and have him fired. Now move." The nanny, her icy facade finally cracking, scrambled for the telephone. Roberto sank into the designer rocking chair, clutching his son to his chest. Lucas didn't fight the embrace, but he didn't relax into it either. He was simply limp, like a rag doll. "Hold on, Lucas. Daddy's here. Daddy will fix this," Roberto whispered into his ear. But as he rocked his son in the twilight of the opulent room, surrounded by useless luxuries, a horrifying thought took root in Roberto's mind. One he couldn't shake. It isn't me he needs, and I'm the one who sent her away. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It felt like a verdict. And Roberto was beginning to suspect he had made the gravest error of his life. A mistake no amount of money could ever correct. Dr. Valenzuela arrived in 18 minutes. He was a short, bald man with a piercing gaze behind thick-framed spectacles. He was the nation's most celebrated pediatrician, the specialist entrusted with the children of presidents and celebrities. A man of science, he remained unmoved by powerful names or vast fortunes. He strode into Lucas's room without a word of greeting for Roberto, proceeding directly to the small boy who lay listless upon his father's oversized bed, where Roberto had placed him, desperate to keep him close. The doctor produced his stethoscope. With swift, practiced motions, he shone a light into the child's eyes, palpated his abdomen, inspected his throat, and checked his ears. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable, punctuated only by Lucas's shallow breathing and the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Dr. Valenzuela removed the earpieces of his stethoscope and turned to face Roberto, who stood rigidly by the bed, his knuckles white and his face ashen. "What is it, doctor?" Roberto asked, his voice raw. "It must be an infection, a virus. Tell me what antibiotic he needs. I'll have it flown in from anywhere. Switzerland, Germany. The cost is no object." The doctor slowly packed his instruments into his leather bag. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose, and looked at Roberto with a solemnity that froze the millionaire's blood. "There is no infection, Mr. Montenegro. His lungs are clear. There is no otitis, no pharyngitis, no viral gastroenteritis." Then, why does he have a fever of nearly 40 degrees? Why isn't he eating? Why won't he look at me? Roberto was on the verge of breaking. "It's a psychogenic fever," the doctor said flatly. "His body is manifesting a severe trauma. The child is shutting down, Roberto. We call it anaclitic depression or hospitalism syndrome. Even when it occurs in their own home, he has essentially lost the will to engage with the world because his primary emotional bond was severed." Roberto blinked, a mixture of confusion and defiance crossing his face. "Emotional bond? His mother passed away over a year ago, doctor. You know that. We have been coping, and he was improving." "I am not speaking of his biological mother," Dr. Valenzuela cut in, walking to the window and staring into the dark night. "I am speaking of his most recent attachment figure. Children don't comprehend DNA. They comprehend who holds them, who makes them laugh, who makes them feel safe. I have seen Lucas's weight charts. He began gaining weight and showing more vitality over the last 3 weeks. What changed in the past 48 hours? Who is gone?" Roberto stood paralyzed. An image of Elena in her simple blue uniform with her luminous smile seared itself into his mind. I dismissed an employee," Roberto admitted in a low voice thick with shame. "A cleaning girl. She played with him sometimes, that was all." The doctor raised an incredulous eyebrow. "Roberto, a child does not suffer a collapse of this magnitude over someone who sometimes played with him. This boy is grieving. To Lucas, that woman was his entire world. By tearing her from his life, you have ripped the very ground from beneath his feet. To his developing mind, it is as if he has suffered another death." The truth crashed down on Roberto like a slab of concrete. He had saved his jewelry, but in doing so, he had utterly broken his son's heart. She stole something, Roberto offered weakly. I had to fire her. It was a matter of principle, of security. And what was the value of this item she stole? The doctor asked, his voice like ice. Was it worth more than your son's sanity? Because let me be perfectly clear, Roberto. If this child does not emerge from this state within the next 24 hours, we will have no choice but to hospitalize him for tube feeding. His immune system is already being suppressed by the stress. In his condition, a common cold could turn into pneumonia. He is allowing himself to die from grief. Roberto staggered, bracing himself against the wall, allowing himself to die. Just then, the bedroom door opened. Sophia swept in, still wearing her gala gown, a flute of champagne held delicately in her hand. She was just back from the event. Well, well, look who it is. The famous doctor, she said, her voice light, almost a taunt, the words softened by the alcohol. Have you given the boy one of your magic pills to stop all this drama? The party was simply divine, Roberto. Everyone was asking after you. I had to tell them you were suffering from a dreadful migraine. The chasm between the doctor's grave diagnosis and Sophia's levity was jarring. Dr. Valenzuela fixed her with a look of undisguised contempt. Madam, we are discussing a critical medical situation. The child may require hospitalization. Sophia let out a short, disbelieving laugh and took a sip from her glass. Please, doctor, you're being far too dramatic. Children cry and eventually they tire themselves out and fall asleep. I'm sure he just misses that maid. We'll buy him a pony tomorrow, and this will all be forgotten. Roberto looked at Sophia, but this time he truly saw her. He saw the utter indifference shimmering in her eyes. He saw how she hadn't moved an inch toward the bed, hadn't made a single gesture to touch Lucas. He saw that the fate of her champagne flute concerned her more than the fever consuming his son. And in that moment, a dark and terrible suspicion began to take root in Roberto's mind. His thoughts flashed back to the robbery. He remembered how quickly Sophia had found the ring. He remembered her insistence on searching the handbag. And now, seeing this chilling lack of empathy, his heart screamed a warning his mind had refused to hear. Doctor, Roberto said, his gaze fixed on the physician, completely ignoring Sophia. Do you really think so? If she were to return, would he improve? It is the most effective medicine available right now, Valenzuela affirmed. Far more powerful than any pharmaceutical I could possibly prescribe. If you can get her back here, do it. Pride doesn't heal children, Roberto. Love does. That's absurd, Sophia snapped, her smile vanishing. That woman is a thief, Roberto. You will not allow a criminal back into this house, near that child. It's dangerous. I absolutely forbid it. Roberto turned to face Sophia. His expression was unreadable, a dark and dangerous calm. You don't decide who comes into my house, Sophia, and I'm beginning to question what the real danger to my son is. What are you talking about? Sophia flinched, taking an involuntary step back from the shift in her fiancé's tone. I mean that I am going to uncover the truth. Today. Right now. Roberto crossed to the desk in the corner of the room, flipping open his laptop. Doctor, please stay with Lucas. There is something I need to check. What are you doing? A slight tremor had entered Sophia's voice. I'm going to review the security footage, Roberto said, his voice like ice. The system records 24/7 to the cloud, even the feed from the staff quarters. I never bothered to look at it because I took you at your word, and I trusted the physical evidence. But if my son is dying because of that decision, I need to be 100% certain I didn't make a catastrophic mistake. The color drained from Sophia's face. The champagne flute slipped from her grasp, landing on the rug with a soft thud, miraculously intact. It only spilled, staining the white fibers like a blossoming wound. "Roberto, don't be ridiculous. The cameras in the staff room are broken." "You told me that yourself, months ago." "They were repaired last week, Sophia, when the entire system was upgraded." Everything was recorded. The silence that descended in the wake of those words was more damning than any confession. Sophia didn't say, "Go on, check them." She simply stood frozen, her mouth agape, raw terror shining in her carefully painted eyes. Roberto saw that fear, and in that single instant, before his fingers even brushed the keyboard, he knew the truth. But he had to see it. He needed to witness with his own eyes how the woman he intended to marry had systematically destroyed his son's world. "Let's watch a little movie, shall we, Sophia?" Roberto said, his fingers already navigating to the video file stamped with the date and time of the dinner party. "Sit down." From the bed, Lucas let out a low, painful whimper. Dr. Valenzuela gently placed a cool cloth on the boy's forehead, his eyes meeting Roberto's with a look of solemn approval. The night of reckoning had arrived, threatening to shatter the very foundations of the mansion. A cold light from the laptop's high-definition screen washed over Roberto's face, carving deep shadows beneath his weary eyes. In the suffocating quiet, the only sound was the low whir of the hard drive, processing the data, punctuated by the faint, shallow breaths of Lucas, who lay just a few feet away, nearly delirious with fever. Dr. Valenzuela stood his ground, arms folded across his chest like an impartial judge awaiting a verdict, while Sophia was frozen by the door, her hand still reaching for the spot where her champagne flute had shattered. With fingers that trembled for the first time in years, Roberto typed in the administrator password. This tremor was not born of a failing business deal, but of a terrifying dread of the truth. The security software launched, revealing a grid of camera feeds from every corner of the estate. "Roberto, please." Sophia's voice was a strangled, pathetic whisper. "Don't do this. It's an invasion of privacy. You have to trust me. I am going to be your wife." "If you have nothing to hide, Sophia, this will only prove your innocence," he replied without looking at her, his voice a blade of cold steel. He clicked on the folder labeled Camera 4, Service Quarters Laundry. He selected the date from 2 nights prior, time-stamped at 9:15 p.m., just after dinner, moments before the screaming began. The footage loaded instantly in crisp 4K. The picture was pristine, its clarity brutal. On screen, the small, modest utility room appeared. It was empty. The timestamp ticked forward. 9:15 and 3 seconds, 21, and then the door swung open. But it wasn't Elena who walked in. It was Sophia. Roberto felt the air rush from his lungs. In the video, Sophia was wearing the same stunning red dress from that evening. She glanced down the hall, first one way and then the other, ensuring she was alone, and pulled the door shut behind her with an almost theatrical stealth. Her face, bathed in the room's harsh fluorescent glow, held no trace of anxiety or concern. Instead, it was a mask of cold, calculated resolve. Transfixed in horror, Roberto watched his fiancée glide toward the chair where Elena's frayed backpack sat. He saw her nose crinkle in disgust as her fingers brushed against the cheap material. Then, with a single, fluid motion, she brought her right hand to her left. The diamond flashed, a brilliant flare of light on the screen. She was slipping off the ring. "No," Roberto whispered, a wave of bile rising in his throat. On the screen, Sophia unzipped the backpack, rummaged inside for a moment, and pulled out the yellow rubber gloves. She slid the ring deep into one of the fingers, pushed it all the way down, and then placed the gloves back inside. Next, she glanced at herself in the small wall mirror, deliberately mussing her hair before practicing a look of utter panic. Just before she left, a smile touched her lips, a fleeting, twisted curve of pure, satisfied malice. Roberto froze the frame on that very smile. The room plunged into a dead, tomb-like silence. He turned, slowly, to face Sophia. Her face was pale, her perfect makeup a stark contrast to the waxy complexion of someone whose world has just been obliterated. "Roberto, I can explain," she stammered, taking a step back until she hit the doorframe. It was an honesty test. Yes, that's all. I wanted to see if she would return it if she found it. I did it for us, to make sure the staff was trustworthy. A test. Roberto rose from his chair. His towering frame seemed to consume all the air in the room, casting a menacing shadow that made Sophia flinch. "And why didn't you say it was a test when you accused her of being a thief in front of my partners? Why did you let me throw her out onto the street like an animal?" "Because I panicked. And because she doesn't belong with us. Roberto, look at her. She's a pauper with no class." "Shut up," Roberto said. It was only a whisper, but it landed with the force of a shout. He turned back to the computer. "There's something else I need to see. Something the doctor mentioned. About trauma." He opened another folder. Camera 2. Main living room. Timestamp. 8:30 p.m. During cocktail hour. The video showed Elena on the floor, playing peacefully with Lucas. The little boy was laughing. The scene was one of perfect calm. Then, Sophia entered the frame. The argument began. You could see Sophia snatching the toy away from the child, followed by the moment that shattered Roberto's heart into a million pieces. The camera, with its high-definition lens, had captured the precise movement. Sophia leaned over the boy just as Elena was reaching for a dropped toy. Sophia's hand, her nails long and sharp, found Lucas's soft arm and pinched his skin viciously, twisting her wrist as she did. On the screen, Lucas's mouth opened in a silent cry of agony, his small back arching in pain. Roberto squeezed his eyes shut, unable to watch another second. He remembered the crying from that night. He remembered Sophia's dismissive words. "He's just throwing a tantrum." It wasn't a tantrum. It was pain. His own fiancée, the woman who was meant to be a mother to his son, had physically tortured the boy, all to orchestrate a meltdown and frame the nanny. A rage so primitive, so volcanic, surged through Roberto that he had to grip the edge of the solid wood desk to stop himself from lunging at her. His knuckles turned white. The wood groaned under the pressure. "Doctor," Roberto said, his voice raspy, his eyes still fixed on the frozen image of his crying son. "You saw that." Dr. Valenzuela adjusted his glasses, his face a mask of utter contempt. "I saw it perfectly. That is physical assault on a minor, and it is a reportable offense. You have evidence of a crime, Roberto. Not just slander, but child abuse." Roberto turned slowly to face Sophia. The look in his eyes held no love, no desire, not even a trace of respect. There was only the cold emptiness one feels when looking at a monster. "You touched my son," Roberto said, each word landing like a death sentence. "You hurt my son, deliberately, for your own twisted power game." Sophia tried to regain her haughty composure, though her legs were trembling. He was hysterical. He needed to be disciplined. "Someone has to teach that spoiled child some manners since you're clearly incapable." "I did it for his own good. And as for the ring, well, she had it coming. She acted like she owned the place. I own this house. I am your future wife." Roberto started walking toward her, each step slow, measured, and relentless. Sophia fell silent. Real fear began to set in. "You're wrong about everything, Sophia," he said, stopping a few feet away from her. "You own nothing here. And you are most certainly not my future wife." The tension in the room was so thick, the air felt electric. In his sleep, Lucas whimpered, tossing restlessly with fever, completely unaware that his father was fighting the most important battle of his life, just feet from his bed. "Give me the ring," Roberto commanded. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly quiet, the same tone he used in the boardroom right before dismantling a rival corporation. Sophia covered her left hand with her right, shielding the diamond as if it were a part of her own body. "You can't speak to me like that. We're engaged. There's a prenuptial agreement being drafted. Your lawyers can't save you from a 4K video of you committing 2 federal offenses." Roberto cut her off. "You have 10 seconds to give me that ring, or I'm calling the police right now and handing over this evidence of felony child abuse. Do you have any idea what happens to high society women in prison, Sophia? I doubt they'll be impressed by your designer wardrobe." Sophia gasped, her eyes filling with tears of pure rage, not remorse. She stared at Roberto, searching for any sign of hesitation, but she found only a wall of granite. Her eyes darted to the doctor, who watched her with revulsion. She realized she was cornered. With a scream of pure frustration, she tore the ring from her finger so violently that it scratched her skin. "Take your damned ring!" she yelled, hurling it at his chest. The ring struck Roberto's suit and fell to the floor, rolling across the carpet until it came to rest beneath Lucas's crib. Roberto didn't even glance down. For him, that jewel was now worthless, utterly tainted. "Now get out," he said, gesturing toward the door. "You have 10 minutes to get your things out of my house. Anything you leave behind in 10 minutes will be burned in the garden." "You're throwing me out?" Sophia shrieked in disbelief. "It's the middle of the night. You can't do this to me." "What will people say? I am the chairwoman of the charity board." Roberto let out a dry, humorless laugh. "People will say whatever I tell them to. If you leave now and disappear from my life quietly, I will say we separated over irreconcilable differences. But if you dare to say a single word against me, or if you ever come within 100 meters of my son again, I will release the video to every social network, to every news station. You will become the most hated social pariah in the country. No one will even have coffee with you. You choose, a quiet exile or public annihilation." Sophia opened her mouth to retaliate, but the sheer weight of his threat crushed her. She knew Roberto possessed the power and the means to follow through on his promise. She swallowed hard, her face contorting into a mask of pure hatred. "You will regret this, Roberto," she hissed, regaining some of her venom. "You'll be left all alone with your defective son." "No one is going to want to take on that burden. That maid isn't coming back. You humiliated her in front of everyone. Do you really believe she has so little dignity that she'll return just because you snap your fingers? You are going to die alone in this cold mansion." "I would rather die alone than live with a viper," Roberto replied, his expression unmoved. "Out! Now!" Sophia spun on her heel, her stilettos digging into the thick carpet, and stormed from the room. A moment later, her hysterical shrieks echoed down the hall, demanding someone help her with her suitcases, followed by the slamming of doors and the sound of something shattering. Roberto stood motionless until he heard the engine of her sports car ignite in the driveway and then race off at full speed, its sound swallowed by the night. Only then did he exhale, his shoulders slumping under the pressure of emotional exhaustion. He dragged a hand across his face, feeling 10 years older. "She's gone," he said, more to himself than to the doctor. Dr. Valenzuela approached and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've excised the tumor, Roberto. It had to be done. But the patient remains in critical condition." The doctor gestured to the bed. Lucas was drenched in sweat, groaning in a feverish delirium. Ma, Elena," the boy babbled, his small hands clenching in the air, searching for something that wasn't there. Roberto's heart constricted. His victory over Sophia was meaningless if he lost Lucas. "What do I do?" "Doctor, it's 12:30 in the morning. I don't know where she lives. I don't have a precise address, only the district. The agency is closed until Monday." "You have resources, Roberto," the doctor said as he gathered his things. "You're a man who moves mountains to build skyscrapers. Move a mountain to find that woman." My work here is finished. I've given him an injection to reduce the fever temporarily, but it will wear off in 4 hours. If that boy doesn't have an emotional reason to fight by sunrise, we'll have to hospitalize him. And in the hospital, away from his home, his condition will deteriorate much faster. The clock is ticking. The doctor departed, leaving Roberto alone in the semi-darkness. Roberto gazed at his son, then walked to the crib and knelt, picking up the ring from the carpet. He held it in his palm for a long moment, staring at the cold diamond that had wrought so much misery. Then, he slipped it into his pocket, not as a treasure, but as a monument to his own blindness. He moved to his desk and sifted through the physical personnel files. He found Elena's record. Name: Elena Ramirez. Address: Los Olivos Street, number 45, the San Judas district. San Judas. It was one of the most dangerous and impoverished areas on the city's outskirts. A place the police only dared to enter with backup, where luxury cars were stripped to the frame in minutes. Roberto glanced at the clock. 4:45 a.m. He didn't call his driver. He didn't summon his head of security. He knew this was something he had to do himself. He couldn't send an envoy to ask for forgiveness. The king himself had to kneel before the commoner. He grabbed the keys to his armored SUV, shrugged off the jacket of his $5,000 suit, and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. Walking to the bed, he kissed Lucas's feverish brow and whispered, "Hang on a little longer, son. Daddy's going to get your medicine, I promise, even if I have to tear down this entire city to do it." With a fierce resolve, Roberto left the room. The vast, empty mansion receded behind him as the millionaire plunged into the night, heading for the slums, ready to beg, to pay, to plead for the one thing his money had failed to keep: a kind heart. The GPS on the armored SUV's dashboard announced he had reached his destination, but what Roberto saw through the windshield, slick with a cold drizzle, bore no resemblance to the residential enclaves he was used to. Los Olivos Street was a euphemism. It was a packed dirt alley, pocked with craters that threatened to shatter the suspension of his luxury vehicle. On either side stood half-finished houses with exposed brick and corrugated tin roofs, huddled together in a state of decay that turned Roberto's stomach, not from disgust, but from a sudden, stabbing guilt. This is where she lived, the woman he had accused of stealing to enrich herself, when reality screamed that she fought every single day just to survive. Roberto cut the engine. The silence outside was shattered by the distant, aggressive barking of several stray dogs. He stepped out of the vehicle feeling like an intruder, an alien on a hostile planet. His designer white shirt, now without its jacket, glowed in the darkness like a target, but he didn't care. He walked toward the house marked with the number 45, hand-painted in black on an old, splintered wooden door. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What right did he have? Only hours ago, he had humiliated her. He took a deep breath, swallowed his pride, and struck the wood 3 times. An eternity seemed to pass. Cautious footsteps sounded on the other side. "Who is it?" came Elena's voice, trembling with fear. "It's me, Roberto Montenegro," he replied, trying to keep his own voice from sounding like a threat. A tense silence followed. "Go away," she said, her voice broken but firm. "If you've brought the police, you don't need to knock. Just break down the door if you want. There's nothing left for you to take from me. You've already taken my job and my dignity." "It's not the police, Elena. I've come alone. Please, open the door. I need to talk to you. It's about Lucas." The boy's name was the key. There was the sound of a rusty deadbolt sliding back, followed by the rattle of a security chain. The door creaked open just a few inches, revealing half of Elena's face. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair was a mess, and she wore a faded cotton t-shirt. But seeing Roberto standing there, drenched by the rain and wearing an anguished expression she had never seen on him before, her defenses lowered slightly, though the resentment remained. "What happened to Lucas?" she asked, her concern for the boy overriding her anger at the man. "He's sick, Elena, very sick. He has a high fever. He won't eat. He won't speak. The doctor says it's depression, that he's just fading away because you're gone." A pained sigh escaped Elena's lips as she closed her eyes for a fleeting moment. "Oh, my sweet boy," she whispered. When her eyes opened again, they were fixed on Roberto, cold and hard as stone. "And what exactly do you expect from me, sir? You're the one who threw me out. You called me a thief. You threatened to have me thrown in jail if I ever showed my face again. Do you want me to go and care for him, only to have your fiancé humiliate me all over again?" "Sophia is gone," Roberto cut in, stepping closer to the doorway, heedless of the rain soaking his shoulders. "I sent her away. I know the truth, Elena. I saw the security footage. I saw what she did with the ring. I saw how she hurt Lucas." Elena pulled the door wide open, genuine shock etched across her face. You know what really happened? I know everything, and I don't know how to begin to ask for your forgiveness. I was blind. I was a proud, arrogant fool who put his faith in the wrong woman and destroyed the one person who showed my son any real love. Just then, from within the small house, came a dry, rattling cough, a deep, painful sound that spoke of serious illness. "Elena." "Who is it, my child?" called a frail voice from the next room. A look of anguish crossed Elena's face as she glanced over her shoulder. "It's my mother, sir. She's very sick. Her oxygen ran out tonight, and I have no money to refill the tank because they never gave me my final pay. I can't leave. I can't just abandon her to go and look after your son. No matter how much I might want to, my place is here." Roberto's gaze drifted past Elena into the house. He saw a home of stark humility, a floor of polished concrete, furniture that was old but immaculately kept. The air hung heavy with the scent of medicine and simmering broth. He saw Elena's world, raw and unfiltered. She hadn't stolen the ring. She was simply desperate. And he, with all his millions, had nearly crushed her. In that moment, Roberto did something he hadn't done in his entire adult life. He ignored the mud on the floor. He ignored his status as a real estate magnate. He ignored all logic. He knelt. Right there, in the doorway of that humble home, Roberto Montenegro lowered one knee to the damp earth and looked up at Elena. "Elena," he said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes shining, whether from the rain or from tears. "I'm not just asking you to return as an employee. I am begging you to come back as my son's salvation, and you won't have to leave your mother. Bring her with you." "What?" Elena faltered, taking a step back in disbelief. "I have the space, and I have the resources. My driver can be here with a private ambulance in 20 minutes. Just say the word, and we'll take your mother to the finest clinic in the city, or we can set up a hospital-grade room in my own home with around-the-clock nursing care. Whatever you prefer. I will cover every one of her medical expenses, for the rest of her life, if need be. Not as a salary, but as restitution for the wrong I did to you." Elena gazed down at the powerful man kneeling before her. She no longer saw arrogance in him, only the raw desperation of a father. She saw a man who would trade his entire fortune to see his son well again. "Sir, please get up. There's no need for this," she said, deeply moved, reaching for his hands to help him to his feet. "I'm not doing this for the money or for the clinic. I'm doing it because that little boy captured my heart from the very first day. If Lucas needs me, I'll be there. And your mother?" Roberto asked as he got to his feet and brushed the dirt from his trousers as if it were nothing. "My mother would tell me to go. A sad smile touched Elena's lips. She always says that children are sacred. But can you truly help her? It's a promise, Elena, and this time I'll stake my life on it. We have to go. My son is waiting. Elena nodded, then hurried back inside, grabbing the very same handbag that had been searched just hours earlier. She gave her mother a fleeting kiss on the cheek, explaining she would return shortly with help, and then stepped out into the night. Roberto held the door of the SUV open for her as if she were royalty. As the vehicle sped away from the neighborhood, leaving the world of poverty and pain behind them, Roberto knew he wasn't just bringing a nanny home. He was bringing back hope. The drive to the mansion was a blur of city lights streaking past them at speed. Roberto drove with a controlled urgency, his knuckles white as they gripped the leather steering wheel. Beside him, Elena rode in silence, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Returning to the place where she had been so utterly humiliated was no small feat, but the vision of Lucas, frail and suffering, fueled the courage she so desperately needed. "Does he still have a fever?" she asked as the imposing gates of the estate came into view. The doctor managed to bring it down slightly, but he warned the effect was only temporary. He said that if Lucas doesn't have some kind of emotional breakthrough soon, we'll have no choice but to take him to the hospital. Roberto swallowed hard, pulling the car to a jarring stop before the main entrance. They didn't wait for a valet or security to greet them. Roberto and Elena bolted from the car and rushed into the house. A deep, sepulchral silence filled the mansion, the same unnerving quiet that had reigned for the past 2 days. They hurried up the grand staircase. As they reached the second-floor landing, the knot in Elena's stomach tightened. Lucas's bedroom door was ajar, a soft light spilling into the hallway. They stepped inside. The sight that greeted them shattered Elena's heart. Dr. Valenzuela sat in a chair by the bed, his head drooping with exhaustion. In the enormous bed, Lucas looked impossibly small, lost amidst the silk sheets. He was pale, with dark circles starkly etched beneath his closed eyes. His breathing was a faint, steady wheeze. The boy was awake, yet his gaze was vacant, fixed on the ceiling in a catatonic stare. "We're here," Roberto announced, his own breath ragged. The doctor startled awake, getting to his feet. The moment he saw Elena, an expression of profound relief washed over his serious features. "Thank God. Quickly, come closer. We don't have much time before his fever spikes again." Elena needed no further prompting. She let her handbag fall to the floor and hurried to the bedside. She sat on the edge of the mattress with infinite care, as if it were made of glass. Her hands, now free of their gloves, warm and calloused from her work, reached for the child's limp little hand. "Hello, my love," she whispered. Her voice wavered for a moment, but then it steadied, filling with a maternal tenderness that seemed to pour directly from her soul. "Captain Lucas, your co-pilot has arrived." Lucas did not respond at first. His eyelids fluttered slowly, as though he were journeying back from some distant, unreachable place. Elena leaned in closer, gently stroking his feverish brow and brushing aside the damp strands of his hair. "I'm here now, little bird. I'm back. No one is ever going to take me away from you again. I promise." And then, Elena began to hum. It was the same tune from the evening of the dinner party, an ancient, simple lullaby that needed no accompaniment. Sleep, my child." The effect was almost electric. A slight tension coursed through Lucas's small frame. His eyes, which had been staring into nothingness, slowly turned toward the source of the sound. They found and then focused on Elena's face. There was a flicker of doubt, of disbelief, as if the boy suspected he was dreaming. But then Elena gave him a smile, one brimming with tears and pure, unreserved love, and she pressed a kiss to his hand. Recognition finally ignited in the child's eyes. Nah, Lucas stammered, his voice raspy from disuse. Yes, my darling. Nana's here. Elena gently lifted him, drawing him against her chest. Lucas let out a profound sigh, a sound that seemed to release all the pain and fear he had held inside for the past 48 hours. He buried his face into the crook of Elena's neck, clinging to her shirt with a strength that was startling in his weakened state. And then he began to weep. But these were not the hysterical sobs of desperation, nor the whimpers of sickness. It was a cry of pure relief, of release, a cry that said, "You are here, and I am safe." Roberto, watching from the doorway beside the doctor, felt tears streaming down his own cheeks, and he made no move to stop them. He watched as a hint of color slowly returned to his son's pale cheeks. He saw the deathly tension finally recede from his small body. Dr. Valenzuela approached quietly and placed a hand on the boy's forehead as he continued to cling to Elena. He waited a few moments. Then he looked over at Roberto and gave a slight, knowing smile and a single nod. "His temperature is coming down," the doctor whispered. "His heart rate is stabilizing. Cortisol levels are dropping. And oxytocin is on the rise. It's pure chemistry, Roberto, the miracle of human touch. He's going to be all right." Roberto covered his mouth with his hand, stifling a sob. He collapsed into a nearby armchair, feeling his legs give out from sheer relief. He had closed $1,000 million deals. He had built empires, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could compare to the sensation of watching his son return to the world of the living, held in that humble woman's arms. Elena was rocking Lucas gently, whispering things only the two of them could understand. "Are you hungry, my love? Would you like some warm milk? I can get it for you." Lucas, still whimpering softly, nodded against her shoulder. "Milk," he murmured. "I'll prepare it myself," Roberto said, leaping to his feet. He needed to be useful. He needed to serve them. He bolted down to the kitchen. As he warmed the milk, he glanced around. The mansion, which had always struck him as a cold museum, suddenly felt different. It felt inhabited. He realized that for years he had tried to fill the void in his life with expensive objects, with a trophy fiancé, with professional success. But the true wealth was upstairs in that room. When he returned with the bottle, he found a scene that would be etched into his memory forever. Lucas was drinking the milk eagerly, cradled by Elena, who was stroking his back. The boy's eyes were no longer vacant. Every so often, he would release the bottle's nipple just to touch Elena's face, making sure she was still there, before he continued to eat. With the immediate danger averted, Elena tentatively lifted her gaze. "Thank you, sir," she murmured. "No." Roberto settled on the edge of their bed, careful to respect her space. "The thanks belong to you, Elena. You have given me back my son, and I swear on my wife's memory that I will spend the rest of my life atoning for what I put you through." Lucas, content and safe at last, let go of the bottle. His gaze shifted from Elena to his father, and for the first time in months, there was no trace of fear in his eyes. In its place was an invitation. "Papa," Lucas said, reaching a small hand toward him. Roberto took his son's tiny hand and brought it to his lips. Then, driven by a new strength, he did what he had promised back in part 1. He slipped off his shoes, climbed onto the bed, and sat down beside them. The circle was now complete. "We're here, champ," Roberto whispered, wrapping a protective arm around both Elena and Lucas, shattering every social and professional barrier that had ever existed. "We are all here now." The storm had passed. Outside the mansion, the downpour ceased, and the first light of dawn began to stain the sky in shades of violet. Inside, human warmth had finally conquered the cold marble. Lucas drifted into a profound sleep, his fever gone, one hand clutching his father's and the other his nanny's, breathing in peace for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The calendar on the mahogany desk marked exactly 1 year since that night of fever and storm, but Roberto Montenegro's office no longer resembled the cold, sterile command bridge of a warship. Now, spread across skyscraper blueprints and merger contracts, were drawings made with wax crayons. A scribble of blue and red that vaguely looked like a superhero stood in a silver frame beside his university degree. Roberto entered the office with a noticeably lighter step. He no longer walked with the weight of the world on his shoulders, but with the energy of a man who had a real reason to finish his day. His secretary, a woman who had worked for him for 20 years and had once been terrified of him, now smiled as he walked in. "Good morning, Mr. Montenegro. You have the meeting with the Dubai investors in 10 minutes, and," she called again. Roberto's smile did not falter, but a flicker of steel entered his eyes. "Sophia." "Yes, sir. She was inquiring if you might reconsider the purchase of her shares in the art gallery. She claims to be in a precarious financial state." Roberto paused at the glass door, staring out at the city skyline he had helped to erect. The memory of his ultimatum to Sophia surfaced, a quiet exile or complete public ruin. She had opted for obscurity, but society has little mercy for the fallen. Deprived of Roberto's support, Sophia's circle of friends had evaporated into thin air. She had become a pariah, not due to some leaked video, but because her true character had been laid bare, a woman whose value was no deeper than the clothes on her back. "The answer is no," Roberto stated, his voice calm, devoid of rancor, yet utterly unforgiving. "Inform her that the gallery requires honest leadership and then block her number. I do not want her encroaching on my work hours ever again. I am leaving early today." "A special occasion, boss?" "The most important one of the year." A smile touched Roberto's lips, erasing 10 years from his face. "It is Captain Lucas's 3rd birthday. And if I am late for the candles, my co-pilot, Elena, will never let me hear the end of it." 3 hours later, the Montenegro estate was transformed. What had once been a pristine showcase garden, with its untouchable lawn and statues worth more than most homes, was now a joyous battlefield. A colossal, primary-colored bouncy castle stood right beside the Renaissance marble fountain. Helium balloons were tethered to the Doric columns, and most shockingly of all, there was noise, an abundance of it. Roberto parked his car, and before stepping out, he stripped off his tie and tossed it onto the back seat. He unfastened the top 2 buttons of his shirt and rolled up his sleeves. As he walked through the main gate, the scene struck him with an almost physical wave of joy. There was no exclusive guest list, no photographers from society pages. Instead, there was Senora Rosa, Elena's mother, seated in a state-of-the-art motorized wheelchair, laughing as she balanced a plate of cake. Her lungs, thanks to a treatment in Switzerland that Roberto had financed, had recovered to 80% capacity. The permanent oxygen tank was a thing of the past. Children of the other staff members were racing across the lawn, and there was Mr. Tanaka, the stoic Japanese investor, who had flown in solely for the occasion and was now sitting jacketless on the grass, patiently showing 2 small children how to fold paper napkins into origami shapes. And at the heart of it all was Lucas. He was no longer a pale and frightened infant. Now, he was a 3-year-old whirlwind, his cheeks flushed, a superhero cape knotted around his neck. He was chasing a golden Labrador, Roberto's gift from 6 months prior, and letting out peals of laughter. Roberto lingered for a moment beneath the terrace archway, absorbing the scene. He sensed someone beside him. Turning, he saw Elena. She too had transformed. She was out of her uniform, dressed instead in a simple pastel yellow sundress that seemed to illuminate her skin. Tucked under her arm was an anatomy textbook. She was only 2 semesters shy of completing her nursing degree, a career he had insisted she pursue. rearranging her work schedule and covering the entire tuition himself. "You are just in time, sir," she said, her tone carrying the unique blend of respect and familiarity they had cultivated over the past year. Though Roberto had asked her 1,000 times to be less formal, she maintained the respectful address in public, a private code that spoke to their shared history. "I told you I would not miss this for anything, Elena. And please, for today I am not sir. I am the father of the birthday boy. How is he?" "Blissful." Elena's gaze drifted to the child. "He has asked for you 3 times. He said the captain could not blow out his candles without the admiral." Roberto felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest as his eyes met Elena's. Something was there, a subtle tension that had been building month after month. They had not yet crossed that line. Roberto was determined to respect her pace, her dignity. He never again wanted her to feel like a conquest or an employee with benefits. He wanted it to happen between equals, if it happened at all. "Elena," Roberto said, his voice low enough for only her to hear above the noise. "I've been thinking, when you graduate next year, the head nurse position at the Montenegro Foundation is open, but perhaps that isn't what I want to offer you." A faint blush colored Elena's cheeks as she hugged her book to her chest. "Oh, it isn't? Then what is it you want to offer me?" "Freedom," he said. "I want you to know that you no longer work for me out of a need to save your mother. That is already done. I want you to be here because you want to be. Because this is your family." Elena smiled, and it was as if the sun had risen twice. "Roberto," she said, using his first name for the first time in months. "I'm not here for the salary. It hasn't been about the salary for a very long time." Nothing more needed to be said. The air between them hummed with the promise of a future. A slow, sweet, and genuine one. "Dad! Dad!" Lucas's shout shattered the romantic bubble. The boy came tearing toward them at full speed, tripping over his own feet, and crashed into Roberto's legs. The millionaire swept him up into the air with an ease born only from daily practice. "Happy birthday, champ." Roberto held him tight, breathing in the scent of vanilla cake and earth. "Do you like the party?" "It's huge!" Lucas yelled, throwing his arms wide. "Look, Mr. Tanaka made a paper bird, and Grandma Rosa is eating a lot of cake." Roberto laughed. "I'm glad, son. Hey, do you remember what we used to do when you were little? When I'd get home from work?" Lucas furrowed his brow, thinking. He was too young to consciously recall the trauma, but the body remembers. "The airplane?" Lucas asked, a spark of hope in his eyes. "The airplane," Roberto confirmed. Roberto glanced at Elena. She understood instantly, setting her book on a table and drawing near. "But this time we need a full crew," Roberto said. "I can't fly this alone. I need my co-pilot." They walked to the center of the garden where the carpet of grass was softest. The guests gradually fell silent, their attention drawn to the scene. Mr. Tanaka set down his origami and smiled, knowing precisely what was about to happen. Roberto, the man from the covers of Forbes, the titan of the business world, did something that would have scandalized high society, but utterly charmed everyone present. He slipped off his Italian leather shoes, loosened his belt, and lay back on the grass. "Assume flight positions," Roberto called out. Elena laughed, a sound so clear and free, and sat on the grass by Roberto's head, ready to secure the passenger. Lucas squealed with excitement and ran to them. Roberto raised his legs and arms, forming the base of the plane. Lucas climbed on, resting his stomach on his father's feet and gripping his strong hands. "Take off in 3, 2, 1, Elena counted down. Roberto straightened his legs, and Lucas soared into the air. Whoosh! The boy cried, spreading his arms like wings, flying over the garden with only the blue sky as his limit. Roberto looked up, watching his son's face, which was illuminated by pure joy. And just beyond Lucas, he saw Elena's face, upside down as she leaned over him, watching them with a love so profound it made his heart ache with gratitude. A year ago, he had walked into his own home and been horrified by this very scene. He had seen a lack of professionalism, a mess, chaos. He had been so blind, so... Now, as he held his son in the air, feeling the precious weight of life in his hands and listening to the laughter of the woman who had saved both their souls, it all clicked for Roberto as he glanced back at the towering mansion behind them. The pillars, the marble, the gold. It was all just scenery, nothing more than a stage set. The entire estate could burn to the ground tomorrow, and he would still be the wealthiest man alive, so long as he held on to this very moment. "Dad?" Lucas asked from his perch. "Where are we going?" Roberto's eyes met Elena's. She offered him a knowing wink, her fingers gently brushing through his hair, an intimate gesture that affirmed their shared future. A smile spread across Roberto's face, one that radiated from the very depths of his soul. "Oh," Roberto replied, "we're already home." The camera slowly pans upward, rising toward the sky, revealing a garden vibrant with life. Children darted across the lawn while the Japanese investor calmly folded paper cranes. Grandma Rosa reveled in her newfound lease on life, and at the heart of it all was a family forged not by blood, but by love, bound together in a simple game on the verdant lawn. The end.